So I was over here 3 months before the school even started to open.
I can't remember when it was, but it must have been after the interview when I took the job and I drove down and I drove over here, and they were still finishing a lot of the project here. The first time I actually met our principal, she had a hard hat on. Dr. Martin was kind of overseeing the final steps of this place. And there was, as Mr. Scoggio reminded me, there were a lot of questions whether we would even open on time, that kind of the whole work week. I think we just got our occupancy permit like that end of that week.
I remember having to step over a gap in the floor because there was an actual hole in the floor, and it was right at the threshold where the doorways are that close for fire drills. We had to actually step over that hole.
And looking down and seeing people walk below. So there's a metal plate there now, so they've covered that obviously since.
My husband was teaching in science, and they, as he said, they made the mistake of putting those emergency water spigots right there at the doors when the students came in and out, and they were just hanging down. Now the teachers have them kind of up on a shelf, but they were hanging down, and many a student took a shower. You know, they're like, what's this cord? And they would pull it. They got all wet.
I remember that there was a stairwell, and I don't know which one, but there was a stairwell that wasn't finished when the school opened.
So many of the rooms were empty, and it seems hard to believe now when we're just packed to the gills.
I just remember how wide open the hallways were, how the lack of students compared to the prior school where we were packed in.
We had a lot more space when it opened. There were only 850 of us, roughly, that first year. And I actually remember we would walk down the main hallway in front of the library, and like people would just walk with their arms out. Because we had all come from, you know, Brook and Stafford, and like we came from North Stafford, and those hallways were horrible.
We couldn't even fit down the hallways. It was, to be honest, I don't know if the hallways were smaller, if it was just so many more kids there. So when they opened up the Colonial Forge, the new high school, coming here, and probably 800, 1,000 less kids, it was a lot easier to maneuver through the hallways. It just felt almost empty getting through the school.
And they continued to put down the tiles on the floor after the school had opened. They just closed it off to students.
I remember the students got very excited when they walked into the bathroom because you'd put your hands under the faucet. You didn't have to hit a button or turn a knob. The water would just automatically come out, and they're like, this is really cool.
Everything was brand new, but not everything necessarily was complete. The building was, you might have a door without a doorknob, or you might have lights in an area that actually didn't turn on.
That was the big stuff that was still being installed.
No, I was in the 400 classroom, which is a total kitchen classroom, and nothing was hooked up.
We didn't really have no grass. They had a man and a woman planting grass.
Think about the story from the first day. I remember our air conditioning wasn't even working right. And we had complete condensation in my classroom. I actually had to move my kids to a different room because the floor was completely wet that day.
Because the tile had been set so late, there were a lot of places where the glue was coming up through the tile as people sat at their desks, so that made things interesting.
So if you can see my room at all now, you'll see that the floor is completely flat. But I don't know if you can look and see on the side, but you'll see outlets and things that are up high. It's because this room was actually tiered. There were big steps all the way up. So where the trophies are along the wall on the side are actually where the kids were standing.
And while we would teach, they would be hammering and drilling, and it would just be really noisy back here. They were trying to put in the cabinets and the boards, and it was very loud, but you know, we made it through and we did fine.
Yeah, when we first started, I remember the floors, there being cardboard on the floors to start in some of the hallways, in the back hallways. But yeah, it wasn't finished, but it was enough for us to teach, but it definitely wasn't complete.